It is an old maxim of mine that when you have excluded the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. These are the famous words of Sherlock Holmes, and the thoughts of a 19th century detective come to my mind for a very good reason. For I, Bradley Peake, will try my hand as a detective of the 21st century, and shall try to crack the case that has been stirring the minds of internet goers for over 10 years. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going all the way. I'm solving the mystery of Cicada 3301. Our story begins on 4chan.org. 10 years ago, it was one of the most popular entertainment resources in the world, and any visitor could leave a message with a picture, and at the same time, they could remain anonymous. There was practically no censorship on 4chan either, so often posts and discussions contained a huge amount of pornography, hard trolling, and racist jokes. But here, visitors planned mass flash mobs, and they created memes and hacker groups, coordinated actions, and boasted of success. So a subculture was formed there that opposed itself to social networks, that kept rapidly losing freedom. On January the 4th of 2011, a strange ad appeared in the most popular section of 4chan. A simple text on a black background challenging viewers to solve a puzzle within the image itself. This picture is very different from what usually appears on 4chan, and pretty much it just issues a challenge, right? It's not surprising that the forum's frequent flyers were enthusiastic about finding the solution to this puzzle. But only one thing can be said about the picture itself. It was made by a person with very good taste. This person is familiar with the basics of design and typography. I mean, there's a well-readable and contrasting font, there are neat margins on the left and top, the same indentation between the paragraphs, and double indentation after the signature. The phrases are constructed correctly without errors and typos, and in general, all of this would be more appropriate on the pages of a corporate booklet or textbook rather than, well, 4chan, an entertainment resource. But I also noticed unusual gaps. Look carefully, the spaces between words differ to the spaces between sentences. Indeed, after a full stop, the author used a double space. A trifle? Well, not at all.
All your little puzzles making me dance.
Actually, from such a trifle, I can conclude that the text was written by a pedantic and middle-aged American. Why? Well, take a look at this first newspaper printing of the transcription of the Declaration of Independence of America. Now, this was made on July the 6th, 1776, and sentences within paragraphs are separated by double spaces. Now, in America, this typographic tradition survived really until the end of the mid-20th century. At typing courses, secretaries and typists were taught exactly this method of typing. Now, with the advent of computers, another option came into use, the use of just one space. This is something we're all familiar with today, right? But traditionalists and supporters of the academic style of text design defiantly continued to use double spaces, and even cite studies occasionally that prove their correctness. However, these observations don't bring us any closer to the solution of 3301, but only indicate the pedantry and accuracy of the message's author. The most obvious options for solving this problem immediately go out the window. I mean, neither the name nor the EXIF data contain any information whatsoever. And by the way, 4chan, unlike modern social networks, did not remove this data when users published posts, right? So this shows us that the author himself manually took care of this. Interesting.
Someone's kept them that way.
Now, the aspect ratio of the image also attracts some attention. It's a square, or rather, almost a square. 509 points in width and 503 points in height. You have to agree, if you were making a similar picture, you probably would have chosen, well, rounder values, right? Exactly 500 by 500, for instance. This contrasts with the pedantry that we noted earlier. The only thing that really unites this number with the signature 3301 is that they are all prime. They're not divided by any multipliers other than themselves, and this is hardly a coincidence, right? 3302, 510 or 504, these would have changed the whole picture. What does this mean? Well, nothing yet. Now, the first real hint that we get is hidden in the file itself. Someone guessed to open the image in a regular text editor and look at the source code. Perhaps this person was looking for traces that graphic editors often leave at the beginning of files, but he found something completely different. Now, see for yourself how JPEG images look like through the eyes of a computer. A hodgepodge of symbols by which we will not be able to determine what is depicted in the photo, a kitten or an explosion of an atomic bomb. But the file from the post on 4chan contained a line intended for human eyes. Look here, at the very end. It turns out that one message hides another in itself, and this technique is called steganography, which combines the words steganos, meaning covered or concealed, and graphia, meaning writing, obviously in Greek. And this is the most ancient method of secret message exchange. People tried to hide from other people's eyes not just the meaning of the letter, but the very fact of the letter's existence. For example, one of the ancient Greek tyrants conveyed a message to his ally using a tattoo on the body of a slave, right? The poor guy was shaved bald, and then they tattooed a secret message on the back of his head. Now, after a couple of months, the hair securely hid that message, and the slave set off on his way. But look, steganography does not change the text, but hides the very fact of its existence. In our case, until you open the image in a text editor, you will not even guess that there is additional information to it. I mean, the characters at the end of the file don't actually prevent the display of the image itself. The browser or graphic editor simply ignores them. Now, this method of transmitting information was also used by the first ever hackers, since it's actually possible to merge a short note into a photo without the use of additional programs, using simply one command in the console. But we are clearly facing something far more complex. Now, the first three words here evoke an association with ancient Rome. It's the formal name for Claudius, right? But what he says to us is not yet clear. It looks like some kind of code or cipher. However, if you've even been slightly interested in cryptography, well, then the answer is obvious. One of the first ever encryption systems was developed by the Roman commander Gaius Julius Caesar.
Really well.
The principle of his encryption is extremely simple. Write the alphabet twice on two different sheets of paper, put them one under the other, and then shift the lower one by several letters. And now write down the letters of the message from the upper alphabet with the letters that were under them. Now, to decipher this message, the recipient must shift his pair of alphabets in the opposite direction by the same number of letters. This number is called a step, and the algorithm itself is called a shift cipher, or, well, you guessed it, Caesar code, right? In principle, the main drawback of this algorithm is that the key to it is only one number, and even if you don't know it exactly, guessing it will only take a few seconds. Look, it's enough to enter an encrypted message into the online Caesar code calculator, and then you just click the step counter. Counts the steps, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and we get a hint. Now, this obviously looks kind of similar to an instant address, right? The letters HTTP at the beginning, the domain name, com, the JPEG file extension. I mean, we can probably assume that the greater than sign replaces the colon, the number 3 is a slash, and the 2 is a dot, right? So we're on the right track, but even with my assumptions, we don't actually get a usable link. Why? Well, because the Romans didn't distinguish between uppercase and lowercase letters. Also, they didn't use separate numerical digits, and of course, they didn't use modern punctuation. The calculator correctly replaced the letters of the alphabet, but couldn't cope with any of the other stuff, right? So we need to expand the alphabet. But in what order should the new numbers and symbols go? If the order doesn't match the one used by the authors of the encrypted message, then, well, we won't get the correct link. In fact, programmers faced a similar problem at the dawn of the appearance of computers. The letters in computers are stored and processed by their special names or codes. But what code each letter will have was determined by developers of programming languages. So really, until the early 1960s, there were several different kinds of encoding. However, in 1963, the American Standards Association developed a single encoding table, the ASCII. Now, let's try and supplement our alphabet with letters, numbers, and symbols in the order defined by this standard. Now, as a result, we get a link to, well, a new hint. By the way, even the shift step would not have to be selected manually. Tiberius Claudius Caesar, who is mentioned in the hint, was the 4th Roman emperor. So, before proceeding to the next hint, let's discuss who is the protagonist in this saga of obfuscation. Well, one of the most popular theories, which appeared almost immediately and is very popular today, is that it's a head-hunting exercise for the Secret Service. If you're able to solve the riddles of 3301 before anyone else, then you'll end up in some room at an interview for Men in Black. Supporters of this version like to recall the crossword puzzle, with the help of which, in 1943, the British Special Services found gifted people to work on decrypting Enigma. Now, this is true, but only partially. Let me tell you. Indeed, on January the 13th of 1942, a complex crossword puzzle appeared on the pages of the Daily Telegraph. According to urban legend, everyone who solved this crossword puzzle received invitations to work in the cryptography department of Alan Turing. In fact, the day before publication, this crossword puzzle was used in a competition that the newspaper held jointly with the Eccentric Club. Now, participants were invited to solve a crossword puzzle in just 12 minutes, right? The editor-in-chief of the newspaper and the representative of the club followed these events. Out of about 36 applicants, only 5 could cope with the task. Later, they did actually receive invitations to work at Bletchley Park as ordinary code breakers. By the way, the competition was in person, with observers and an unknown task. And besides, actually unexpectedly, they didn't recruit analysts, mathematicians or engineers this way, but just ordinary executors, whose tasks included only routine and monotonous paper pushing, right? They were not required to have any mathematical abilities or analytical skills. They just needed patient, accurate and, well, diligent executors. And by the way, during the war, the staff of the government code and cipher school in Bletchley Park increased from a couple of hundred to actually 9,000 people. Perhaps some of them could share stories that are a bit more off the beaten track here. By the way, I'd have no chance in cracking a crossword puzzle in 12 minutes. I mean, I barely cope with the Metro's crossword on the way to work, and that commute is a good 40 minutes, so they wouldn't have taken me to Bletchley Park.
Look at you lot, you're all so vacant. Is it nice not being me? It must be so relaxing.
Now, Government Code and Cipher School has since changed its name to Government Communications Headquarters, and it still supports this legend. Until now, GCH holds interesting logic contests around Christmas time, but they do it absolutely openly right on their website. Go ahead, maybe you'll end up as a new recruit. In the case of the 3301 riddle, I strongly doubt that playing with the simplest steganography and entry-level cryptographic algorithms would help to identify really off-of-the-wall analysts, right? Much of what we're talking about may be unfamiliar to the general public, but any programmer knows about the Caesar cipher or the ASCII table from the first book he reads. We're talking ABCs here, guys.
Bored.
What?
Bored!
No.
Bored! Bored!
Moreover, all versions and keys to solving riddles were discussed right there on 4chan, that is, anonymously, and right in the public domain. It's like taking a test in the middle of a noisy square where everyone is trying to hand over their answers at once, right? Now, the main body of mathematicians and analysts has traditionally been recruited without the help of logical problems and puzzles. Alan Turing and Gordon Welchman, I think, got to GCH from Cambridge University, and for example, Hugh Alexander Cornell was, at that time, the world-famous British chess champion. But the special services during the war really had to act more covertly, so as to not betray the very fact of the existence of cryptographic departments. Now the government services don't have to hide. That's why, if you want to work for the Crown or Uncle Sam, you just send your CV to the CIA or MI6's HR department, right? But if you've already shown your talents as a developer, mathematician, or analyst on the internet, they'll probably contact you anyway if your abilities are needed. But anyway, back to our riddle. So, we have a link to an image that has been posted on Imager.com. This is basically a website where anyone can upload any image, and in 2012, more than 1 million people visited it every day. So is there a new mystery waiting for us at the end of this link? Whoops. Okay, well this time we've got something completely alien to the first picture. There is a gross mistake in the first word. The text is placed carelessly, almost overlapping with the background picture. Now, it's rectangular, with a width of exactly 500 and a height of 375. These are not prime numbers, no secret messages in the text, right? So these things have nothing in common. We must have missed something in the very first picture, and the link was just a distraction. So let's take a look at the first message again. The empty spot in the lower right-hand corner looks suspicious. Maybe there is another hint hidden within it. Now, if you go ahead and adjust the brightness, contrast, or saturation filters, you won't get any new information, but you will get strange noise that's scattered all over the image. This noise is a slightly different color from the background. It's not black, but it's almost black. I've shown in my previous video actually how you can expose fake photos with the help of such anomalies. Do you remember? If you haven't watched it, we'll put a link somewhere and you can go watch it after this video. But really, there should be no noise in this picture. The black background should have remained black. Now, this image was edited in a very special way. Someone really added another layer of data to the image. This is actually similar to the work of advanced steganographic programs. And these guys, they didn't just add plain text to the end of the file, they actually used a complex algorithm to change the points of the file itself. But now there's a new problem. How can you find the program on which this was done? I mean, there are quite a few steganographic applications, right? But they can only open their own files. Inspired by the news, users started to sort through these programs one by one, and through trial and error, they managed to actually find out that the author of the image used a little-known program of a mathematics student from Hamburg. This very program was called OutGuess. And just so you know, it turns out that this name had been in front of our eyes the whole time. The words guess and out are written here in plain text. So look, this program suddenly became very popular, understandably so. Information about the strange contest was already being discussed way beyond 4chan. Tens of thousands of people tried to solve the message of 3301. So OutGuess broke download records. But therefore, the new suspect became Niels Provos himself, the author of OutGuess. IV.The prodest. From Latin, translates to done by the one who profits from it. This is actually a popular expression from ancient Rome, and it accurately describes the logic of modern investigators. Always, the first suspect is the one who benefits from the crime. Only in the case of Niels Provos, the OutGuess story becomes a defense witness. Look at the archive of the program's page through the Wayback Machine. This is how she looked in January of 2012. You see, Niels Provos released the latest version of the program in 2004, 11 years before the appearance of the riddle of 3301, and he never returned to it. This is easily explained. In 2003, Niels completed his degree at the University of Michigan and got a job at Google as a distinguished engineer on security for their cloud platform. And I very much doubt that he had the time to engage in these kinds of hoaxes, right? In addition, the image of a German mathematician who's quite young is very different from the person who wrote the first message. And Niels didn't really receive any financial benefits from the famous program either. It was distributed for free and was developed primarily for OpenBSD. And this is an extremely interesting point moving forward. The fact is that OpenBSD is a free operating system that was created by hackers for hackers. And technically, special attention is paid to the security and stability of the system. It doesn't use questionable programs or individual modules. Even small errors cause a complete revision of the code. In addition, the system is protected from legal disputes. It only uses open and license-free code. Any use of patent-protected technology is completely excluded here. OpenBSD was created by professionals and for professionals. Therefore, it is often used in network security systems, right? This system really isn't designed for office computers and laptops, but it's extremely effective when we're talking about complex network equipment on secure servers and inter-network interfaces. Now, it seems to me that by choosing OutGuess, the author of the riddle 3301 hinted as to which specialists he's looking for, if we're to follow that narrative. I can actually show you which message was hidden in the very first picture. This message is already much longer than the previous ones. It's actually 83 lines. However, we can only read the first one so far. So this is what's written. Here is a book code. To find the book and more information, go to Reddit. Now in this line alone, I see three important things at once. First, the author of the riddle again indicates which algorithm one should use to decrypt this message. Secondly, he or she indicates where to get the information necessary for decryption. And again, this is an extremely popular site where users can post their news and participate in various discussions. Thirdly, there is still the same double space between the sentences. You can see that the format of the message has changed and the typographic handwriting is still fully recognizable. So we click on the link and, well, it seems we haven't solved the problem just yet. This is how the page looks now. And this is how it looked like almost 10 years ago, 8 days after the start of the quest. You see, after one of Reddit's redesigns, the background image disappeared completely from the page's header, and messages were sorted not by publication date, but actually by popularities. So judging by the hint, we're dealing with a book cipher. What is that? Technically a more advanced encryption method than the Caesar code, right? It's much more reliable and at the same time it's actually easier to use. The essence of the book cipher is that we replace the letters of words of the original message with the numerical place at which they occur in a key book. For example, right, if the key book is the Declaration of Independence, then the name of our channel, Sumsub, can be written as 9, 12, 28, 10, 23, 32. Please note that I encrypted the same pairs of letters S and U with different numbers, right? Now, It's almost impossible to decrypt such a cipher without having the book key. Of course, an attacker can just look in their library and try to pick out a popular key text, right? But this will only work if the key text is something popular, for example, the Bible. And it was by uncovering a key book that one of the 3 cryptograms describing the legendary treasures of the gold digger Beale was hacked at the end of the 19th century. Now, it was actually by uncovering one of these key books that one of the 3 cryptograms describing the legendary treasures of the gold digger Beale was hacked at the end of the 19th century. Now, in this case, Beale, much like me in this situation, used the text of the Declaration of Independence for his encryption. What books he used to encrypt the 2 remaining notes is still completely unknown. For decryption, enthusiasts have already gone through more than 8,000 different texts, and thus far, this search has not been fruitful. Therefore, $30 million worth of treasure is still hidden out there somewhere in Missouri. Now look, we'll probably get a similar result if we try and directly decipher the message that we received, right? These are the first 4 titles. So let's cross-reference those numbers with what we found in the 83 lines. In the first message, the 20th letter is U, the 3rd letter in the second one is O, the 5th letter in the 3rd is S, and the 20th in the 4th is E. UOC. Okay, I think we made a mistake here, but the book in which we're trying to search for letters is not at all similar to an ordinary book. Apparently, it is also encrypted. Okay, there are more than 80 messages on the page, meaningless sets of characters of different lengths, and pictures have been added to 2 messages. The first is a doormat with the inscription, "Welcome," and the second is a stereo picture, clearly made with the help of easystereogrambuilder.com. The images, again, don't look like those that we're used to before. However, you probably already guessed what you need to do with them. That's right, check for a hidden message using outguess. So, in the first picture, there was this message. It seems that 3301 is afraid that fake hints will appear on the internet in the wake of interest in his riddles. Therefore, it will now sign all the messages with an electronic digital signature. Please note that for this, 3301 uses a program for another open operating system, Linux. This is the development of a famous Finnish program, Linus Torvalds. Now, unlike OpenBSD, this operating system can be found not only on servers, but is also used on office computers. It can be used on laptops and even game consoles. And this is actually one of the most popular systems of the Unix family. But still, according to statistics, no more than 5% of users were using this operating system, Linux, back in 2011. Now, it's also important to observe the server here. Now, this is the server of, well, probably one of the best technical institutes in the world, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Now, this is used to work with the keys. Otherwise, the text of the message gives us very little information. I'll only note that the double space is still in place, but the first line begins with an extra character. The hyphen looks somewhat out of place here. This does not look like a banal typo, right? 3301 is too neat for this. Rather, it's a sign of direct speech. And it's been put here to enhance the solemnity of the entire phrase. I've never seen this in letters, chats, or messengers, and it's actually typical for books and essays, rather. The phrase about patience is kind of hard to understand now in 2021 when we've got all this information here, but in 2011 it was absolutely appropriate. 3301's messages on Reddit didn't appear immediately, they were actually regularly added, one by one, over a couple of weeks. The second message here is much more interesting. The first line sounds a bit like a mockery, right? The key is right in front of our eyes. Most likely we're talking about the symbols in the Reddit header. And then the picture actually jokes about itself. Take a closer look. The author chose a fragment of a picture about King Arthur as the background of the stereo image. In addition, if you know how to look at stereo pictures, you'll be able to make out something similar to a cup. It seems that this should be associated with the Holy Grail, right? Now, according to legend, this is the cup into which the blood of the crucified Jesus flowed. And according to legend, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table were looking for it. According to legend, it gives divine knowledge and even immortality. Now I'm starting to feel like Indiana Jones. And the following phrase also attracted my attention, but why? Do you know what the letters KISS stand for? And no, we're not talking about the name of a grandfather rock group. This is actually a shortening of one of the main principles of programming. Keep it simple, stupid. The word KISS is often used in correspondence by programmers to slow down overcooked colleagues. And I actually have very good friends, right, 2 very good friends, who are professional programmers. And I've actually seen them use this term between each other. It seems that now I should take this advice for myself. Okay, look, let's think about the image in the Reddit header. But this is probably the easiest part of the puzzle. I mean, what worried superstitious people the most in 2012? That's right, the end of the world predicted by the Mayans. There was even a film about it. I had an app on my phone and it was like countdown to the end of the world. It was mad. Look at the photo of this stele with the calendar from La Majara. Do you see similar symbols in the left-hand column? Yes, both on the stone and in the Reddit header, Mayan numbers are being used. These numbers have long been deciphered, right? Unlike us, the Maya used a 20-digit counting system. Therefore, the full list of their numbers looks something like this. See, 2, 6, 8, and 0 in the header clearly coincide with the Arabic numerals of the section title. Let's rewrite all the Mayan numbers in Arabic format, and we'll get the string 10, 2, 14, 7, 19, 6, 18, 12, 7, 8, 17, 0, 19. And now let's continue with the title. Right, it's got this strange long form, right? And its beginning coincides with the Mayan key. So the letter A turns into 10, E turns into 14, and so on. As a result, we end up with the following sequence. Okay, looks good, but what should we do with all of this now? Well, do you remember at the beginning of our quest we decrypted the message with the Caesar code? In it, all of the letters were shifted by the same value, known as the shift step. But what if each letter was shifted by its own number of steps? The shifting will effectively be determined by a digital key. That is, we will shift the first letter by 10 steps, the second by 2, and so on. Now, such a complicated kind of shift is called a Vigenere cipher. The algorithm first appeared actually 1500 years after Gaius Julius Caesar's invention, but it was not actually used in practice until the end of the 16th century, when its description was discovered by Blaise de Vigenere. Now, in those years, he worked as an ambassador in Rome, and he spent a lot of time in the Vatican Library. The most interesting thing is that the principle of successive permutations of the Vigenere formed the basis of Enigma, the very German crypto system that was hacked by specialists from Bletchley Park during the war. Now, Vigenere applied separate shifts to each letter, and the Enigma mechanism repeated Vigenere's approach for encoding a single character. But let's get back to 3301. The classic Vigenere substitution table looks like this. It contains just letters. There are no numbers or signs, so we need to alter our key in accordance with this table. There is a 0 in our key, so we'll start with that. It will correspond to the letter A. Now, after the conversion process, our digital key will turn from a combination of numbers to a combination of letters. Voila! Now we can try to decrypt the first message using this key. And what do you know, it looks like a meaningful text. We managed to decrypt the codebook, and now we can actually use this to decrypt the main text. But don't you think this is all a little strange and redundant? I mean, now that we know the flow of decryption, everything seems quite logical. The individual steps are simple and use well-known encryption algorithms, but the chain of reasoning is getting longer and longer. I mean, at each step, we have to check new programs, algorithms, and approaches. One person will obviously not be able to cope with this. So maybe this task was actually initially designed for collective work, right? But look, let's move on. Let's remember actually, the main event of that time in the world of information security was, of course, the appearance of LulzSec. In May of 2011, LulzSec hacked the servers of the American TV channel PBS, and they actually posted fake news that the rapper Tupac Shakur, who was killed in 2006, is actually alive and hiding from everyone in New Zealand. They also published the usernames and passwords of PBS employees and the website visitors. The action was perceived as a revenge for the film about WikiLeaks.
And it's either his way or the highway. And it just really got abusive. So to a point where if you criticized it, he started to threaten people.
Then the hackers set their sights on Sony. First, they hacked the Japanese division of Sony Music, then the Belgian and Dutch divisions of Sony BMG, and then they hacked the network of the Sony Pictures Film Company. As a result of these actions, more than 70,000 Sony user accounts were compromised. This time, the hackers were taking revenge for the persecution of the PS3 hackers. The damage to Sony was immense and was measured in millions of dollars. But their competitors from Nintendo were much luckier. LulzSec also hacked their network, but they didn't publish the data. They actually said, "We're not targeting Nintendo, We like the N64 too much. We sincerely hope Nintendo plugs the gap. Well, now on June the 10th, the group made the data of 26,000 government officials who visited porn.com publicly available. 3 days later, part of the Senate.gov user correspondence became available too. In addition, LulzSec managed to paralyze the websites of the US Senate, CIA units, and the Serious Organized Crime Agency, the SOCA. Unexpectedly, on the night of June the 26th, the group announced its dissolution. In fact, LulzSec actually existed only for 50 days, but during that time, it managed to commit more than 100 cyber attacks. This is kind of surprising considering that the group consisted of only 7 people. Of course, they themselves would not be able to cope with the huge amount of routine and monotonous work on hacking such complex systems. So, the group's members actually had adopted the experience of large companies. Each of them recruited third-party performers to work on different projects. The structure was organized in such a way that many of the performers didn't actually know what they were working on. They outsourced everything. So maybe 3301 is a recruiter of the same hacker group. This would explain the secrecy and anonymity. Unlike government organizations, hackers actually have to hide. In addition, it would explain the specific operating systems and software that the author of the riddles used. Unfortunately, there are 2 strong arguments against this. Even a quick solution of the 3301 quest does not indicate high qualification in any way. It can't really be used to judge the knowledge of network technologies, current encryption methods, or social engineering skills. Real hacker quests actually look quite different. Go over to The Wire, Pornable, or reversing.kr and see for yourself. Unlike 3301's riddles, an untrained person here is unlikely to understand anything except for maybe just individual words. Well, secondly, the history of LulzSec itself speaks out against this kind of assumption. FBI agents actually managed to arrest the group's members, right? And moreover, they didn't even have to carry out complex attacks in the cyber world. Everything was much simpler. The group was actually handed over by an embedded informant, a traitor, a snitch.
Mansour, described as a LulzSec leader, was arrested last year, and sources say he began cooperating with the FBI. His help led to today's arrests of the others, who are all now charged in a series of computer attacks on corporate and government systems.
And at the beginning of 2012, literally everyone knew about it. Therefore, the participants of real hacker groups were, not without reason, afraid of new members. They got rid of participants who even caused a little bit of suspicion. And when you start to be afraid of old friends, it's really unlikely that you'll be looking for new ones, let alone in such a suspicious way, right? So let's move on to the next level of our game. Thanks to the description of the codebook, we can decrypt the message that led us to Reddit. It's funny that the text turned out to be one of the stories about King Arthur, right? I mean, surely you've encountered them at school. For some reason, these stories are loved by humanities teachers and professors all over the world. Well, in any case, they might come in handy for you on this quest. However, we couldn't actually use the original texts as a key, even if we knew that it was definitely the Lady of the Fountain, because we need to actually know exactly how the text was divided into lines in order to decrypt it. But I'm probably not going to torment you with all the tedious counting of strings and characters. I mean, instead, here's the message we got. Call us at US telephone number 2143909608. Now, this message radically changes the rules of the game. For the first time, we get a task that isn't online, but actually in the real world. Not using a computer, but through a telephone. Now, this convinces me beyond all doubt that we can forget about a hacker group affiliation. No would-be hacker would be interested in going further. I mean, a call to someone else's phone always threatens the anonymity of the caller.
It's a trap!
The owner of the number will be able to find out where he was called from, right? And that's at best. At worst, cross-device attacks are possible, which I already told you about actually in the video about network anonymity. Let's put it up here somewhere. But more importantly, if I were to recruit people to a group using the 3301 riddle, then anyone who called me would have immediately failed the test. Well, anyway, I hope you didn't dial the number in the message. And that's not even about anonymity. It's just that that number has changed owners more than once over the past 10 years. Therefore, it's really impossible to actually go through the entire chain of riddles independently. But if you'd actually done this in 2011, you would have heard the following recording on the answering machine.
Very good. You have done well. There are 3 prime numbers associated with the original final .jpg image. 3301 is one of them. You will have to find the other 2. Multiply all 3 of these numbers together and add a .com. on the end to find the next step. Good luck. Goodbye.
It's kind of strange. I mean, usually the puzzle should become more complicated as you progress, but here you don't really have to think much. We've already found a couple of other numbers in question, right? Remember we noticed the strange size of the first picture, 503 and 509? Well, they are indeed prime numbers, and if you multiply 503 and 509, and then you multiply the result by 3301, you get 845,145,127. All that remains is to add .com. And then my paranoia kind of kicks in a bit, and it's like, you can't do this! I mean, in the theory of information security, there is such a concept as a honeypot. This is the kind of bait that is left in a secure network to kind of detect hackers. This technique works well on an elementary basis. Imagine that there is a computer on your network that no one knows about. There's no complex software on it, only a utility that records the addresses of those people who try to access it. Well, what for? Well, if a person tries to log onto this computer, it means that he has received its address by alternately going through all possible addresses in your network. And this is very similar to those actions of a hacker. Look, it's very unlikely that you would have visited 845.145.127.com having made a typo or having accidentally picked it up, right? I mean, the search engines didn't know anything about it either. So everyone who went to the site directly definitely was interested in the riddles of 3301. There could be no casual visitors there, and it seems to me that this is essentially a honeypot, right? This is the second blow to your anonymity. And by the way, Niels Provost, the author of Outguess, he's actually a known developer of such bait programs. An interesting coincidence, isn't it? In any case, like the phone, this site has been long owned by other people. I tried to actually find out what this site looked like 10 years ago, with actually web.archive.org, but I was really set up for failure. The earliest copy of this site dates back to 2013. By that time, all of the information had already been deleted from it. Therefore, in order to go any further, we need to rely on the memories of the participants of this quest. So, if you went to the website at the beginning of 2012, you would have seen a picture with a cicada and a countdown timer. And I'm sure that you would have first checked this picture with Outguess, right? There was indeed an encouraging message in it. You have done well to come this far. Patience is a virtue. Check back at 5 o'clock on Monday, 9th of January 2012, UTC 3301. So, if you were the first visitor of this site, you just have to wait. But no one could have actually predicted exactly what would have happened on January the 9th. On this day, a list of GPS coordinates relating to 14 points scattered around the world appeared on the site. Now, 8 of these coordinates were located in the United States. 2 of them were actually both in Paris and in Seoul. One was in Poland, and one was actually down under in Australia with Lucas. In all cases, the coordinates indicated points on the streets of major cities. It seems that 3301 has finally decided to end the anonymity of hunters for the Holy Grail. I mean, what could be easier than just waiting for the quest participant at the specified location, right? But there were still volunteers, as you can imagine. And soon, photos of all these places appeared on the network. It turned out that at the specified coordinates, there were ordinary lampposts on which posters with the already familiar cicada and QR codes appeared. This is, for example, how a lamppost in the center of Warsaw looked like.
On the bike shelter over here. See, I got it right there. Oh.
It quickly became clear that the QR codes on the pillars are repeated. There are only really 2 different versions of the message. Here's what the first version read. And this is what the second one looked like. As you can see, this is again a book cipher, and the link to the code book is now actually given in the form of a riddle. I didn't actually spend a long time looking for that book. It was the creation of the father of the cyberpunk genre, William Gibson. This is actually a small poem called Agrippa, Book of the Dead. Now, this poem was only distributed on 3-inch floppy disks. In addition to the text of the work itself, an encryption program was recorded on the diskette. After you opened the poem and read it, a program would launch and the poem would be encrypted at once. So you could really only read it once and only once. According to Gibson's plan, this poem could not be saved, copied, or read a second time, but reality played a cruel joke on him. At the presentation, the poem was actually read out aloud by the famous illusionist Penn Gillett. The text was projected in parallel on the screen behind him. One of the visitors of the presentation managed to capture what was happening on video, and the next day, well, he posted the full text of the work in open access. Now, in 2012, this story was again on everyone's lips. A competition was announced on the network to decrypt the corrupted text of the poem. The prize was a complete collection of Gibson's works. The codebook for the second encryption turned out to be volume 6 of the 11th edition of Encyclopedia Britannica. The required section included words from Chitral to Cincinnati. And yeah, the word cicada was also present in it. Both encryptions led to the same result, a site address intended for the darknet. The transition to the anonymous darknet puts an end to another version of what is happening, a network game. Such entertainment was rapidly gaining popularity at that time, right? Sometimes they were even used for commercial purposes. For example, 6 months before the appearance of the first riddle of 3301, The Code was broadcasted by the BBC. This is basically a 3-part educational film dedicated to the basic concepts of modern mathematics. And to attract the attention of the audience, the authors of the film launched basically a series of mathematical puzzle games on the internet.
I think you need to start is here on this site. So, enter the world of the code now, and good luck.
And 1,000 participants of the competition gradually completed tasks and answered questions related to the topics of the film. The final test was actually held offline at the same Bletchley Park where Alan Turing hacked the Enigma code. But the nature of this competition was radically different from our riddle. Using Tor-type software can be dangerous for inexperienced users. If their computers become exit points for the darknet, they're going to bear pretty much all responsibility for the activities of intruders. It wasn't possible to see advertising on 3301, only open and free software was used to solve riddles, and not so many users coped with the installation of the same outguess, right? Most people were just waiting for the results of other people, alone in the dark. The first visitors of this site witnessed an email address field and an invitation to the next level of the game. But look, pay attention to the first paragraph here. It contains instructions that are pretty obvious for any Tor user. Who would even think of installing and configuring special software designed to protect the anonymity of themselves and then give their real email address? I mean, this is frankly an unnecessary recommendation, in my opinion. But the second paragraph is much more interesting. It assumes that individual tasks will be formed for each applicant of the game, and the achieved result will be then recorded. This is kind of how the newly developed remote learning systems were designed at that time. Remember that. The decrypted page address quickly spread among those interested in 3301 riddles, and soon, unsurprisingly, the text changed. You've shared too much at this point. We want the best, not the followers. Thus, the first few there will receive the prize. Naturally, the field for entering an email address had also disappeared, and it's not known for sure what tasks came next for those participants who managed to register, and how many of them there actually were. I actually came across several variants of individual tasks on the web, with the classic cryptographic task of finding prime factors of a large number, the task of decrypting a fragment of a melody in MIDI, but these are all just separate pieces of the mosaic, really. We can only say for sure that soon a new picture appeared on Reddit, where the first riddle, with a book encryption, was posted. 3301 kept its promise. New puzzles appeared in January 2013 and 2014. In 2017, the trail of another chain of riddles surfaced, but the authors of all of these stories never actually revealed themselves. So what was the mystery of 3301 really? I'm not sure I know the answer, and I'm sorry you've waited this long to understand that. But before we go on, I want to ask you, have you noticed that in this video, occasionally a small picture of a cicada appears in the corner of the screen for a few moments? It was written by a pedantic and middle-aged American, the academic style of text design, TH from Cambridge University, of a mathematics student from Hamburg, typical for books and essays, rather. I feel like Indiana Jones, by humanities teachers and professors all over the world. Father of the cyberpunk genre. William Gibson, educational film, dedicated to the basic concepts of modern mathematics. Most people were just waiting for the results of other people. Newly developed remote learning systems were designed at that time. So with the use of those markers, I actually noted the key points that I would use in making a conclusion.
Once you've ruled out the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
Riddle 3301 is a next-generation educational game project. Remember, while talking about the story, I explained the basic encryption algorithms. We remembered the work of World War II decryptors, and we talked about modern hacker groups. Classical English literature and modern digital art also surfaced in the riddles, and also unusual software features of network security, features of the Declaration of Independence, and also the secrets of gold miners. If you watch this video to the end, it's likely that you're as captivated by this mystery as I am. But imagine for a minute that instead of watching our video today, 10 years ago you were scouring forums and chats in search of tips and solutions. You read discussions, you argued, you learned new words and terms. The world of cryptography and big maths is getting closer and closer towards you. All this reminds me of Dan Brown's books, from which millions of people learned about the unusual sculptures in Rome and the mysteries of Leonardo da Vinci's paintings. Is it true that such a detective story is much more interesting than ordinary textbooks and lectures? Maybe. And in this format, the decryption of riddles was very easy to control. If the participants were standing in one place, stagnating, or they had reached a dead end, it was very easy to just suggest some solution on the same 4chan completely anonymously. Well, look, the more hype there was around the project, the more young people would learn about it, the more likely it is that at least one of them is going to connect their future with mathematics, cryptography, or programming. This works like contextual advertising. Let only one person out of 1,000 click on the ad, but if you show the ad to 10 million visitors, you'll make a ton of cash. And never discount the indirect evidence. Remember, the style of texts are characteristic of middle-aged and well-educated Americans. This person clearly has access to very specific academic literature. I mean, how many of you have access to the 11th edition of the Britannica in your bookcase? From here, a student program for steganography and a server with MIT addresses appeared. And it's not difficult for a professor to arrange such a thing. With the appearance of posters around the world, if necessary, both students and colleagues are around to help. So that's what it could be, just a middle-aged cryptography teacher trying to advertise his course to a few would-be undergrads. But anyway, by the way, can you guess why the image of a cicada was used? Well, researchers of 3301 like to associate this with the fact that the breeding cycles of these insects are tied to prime numbers. Larvae of different species of cicada develop in the ground for 5, 7, 11, and even 17 years. And as I've already said, prime numbers are the basis of modern cryptography. It's beautiful, but we've got one small step left. In the early 90s, a group of young scientists at the Berkeley Institute worked on the problems of cryptography, encryption, and anonymity. For their tasks, they used the domain name cicada.berkeley.edu. This is mentioned in the distributions of several programs, old correspondence, and the legendary Cyberpunk mailing list. Surely you've heard of that. Among its participants were the creator of the PGP system, Philip Zimmermann, right? Tor developer Jacob Applebaum, Timothy May from Intel, and even the ideologist of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. A coincidence? I don't think so. Maybe it's just because cicadas aren't going anywhere in a hurry. In any case, my name is Bradley Peake. Thank you for joining me on another laudable, loquacious, albeit longer than usual journey through the online jungle. And I will see you in the next video. By the way, guys, I realize we haven't covered everything about Cicada, and unfortunately we couldn't do so without making it the length of a Netflix documentary. So if you would like to check out the script and also more information about Cicada, we've actually created a website for you. So feel free to follow it and learn more about the mystery that has perplexed the community for over 10 years.